Well, first, let me just welcome everyone. Of course, the poets, Teresa Carson, Cindy Veach, thank you so much for making time for us today. And also, thanks to all the students who've joined us. Some of you are coming, you're not even writing on these poets, so that's wonderful. And then many, many thanks to Dimitri, who's been my contact at CavanKerry now for a while. And I can't say enough about him. He's so helpful and so enthusiastic about this project. Thank you, Dimitri, and it's wonderful that he's here today to tell us a little bit about CavanKerry Press and the poets.
Excellent, excellent. So good afternoon, mi gente, my people, or good morning to Cindy. She's tuning in from Seattle, so it's very early in the Washington area. So I am Marketing and Communications Director at CavanKerry Press. That means I'm the liaison or I'm the communicant between CavanKerry Press authors and our various programming that we do. We are a book publisher of poetry and memoir that's been in the business for 23 years now. And in doing so, we've become a nonprofit. So we have the authorial side where our books are in libraries and in schools and in bookstores. And we also have the programming side, which is where I come in, where we collaborate with different universities and programs like Caldwell University. So first of all, thank you so much, Marianne Miller, for allowing us for our third or fourth year to be having CavanKerry Press poets in the classroom. It's really important when we're reading poetry to realize that poetry is a real thing that exists, and these artists are breathing and they have pulses and they're continuing to write and they're continuing to smile and they're continuing to talk with people. So it's really important in my personal mission to make sure that we bring these authors into the classrooms. And we have two brilliant, lovely authors with us today, who is Teresa Carson and Cindy Veach. The run of the show for the afternoon is going to be that Teresa Carson is going to start first. She's going to read from the book of poems that many of you were assigned. And Teresa, if you want to throw a couple of different poems in there, please be my guest. And then afterwards, we'll turn it over to Cindy Veach, who will also do the same. She'll read from her kind, as some of you read, and then she might be able to throw in a couple of poems from a different project if she so chooses. Then afterwards, we'll turn it over in the last 20-25 minutes to a Q&A. I know all of you prepared some lovely questions, and then we'll just have a dialogue between us and the authors. So we will start with Teresa Carson. Teresa?
Well, thank you all for being here, and Marianne and Dimitri, thanks for asking me to participate. So I'll be reading from my Crooked House, but I've been thinking a lot lately. I get a common question that's asked of me, and I assume of all poets, like, what are the themes in your work, right? And I am never really comfortable with that question because I don't think in terms of themes. Lately, what I've been thinking are, what are the threads that run through my work? And so I would say the warp and the weft that runs through all of my work are time and memory. And so I'm going to read a few poems from my Crooked House that have to do with time. And then I'm going to read two more recent poems so you can kind of see, well, if a poet starts following their threads, where can that lead? Because that's how you grow, that's how you change. About time through time. 1. First lessons. At the moment when I learned to tell time, I learned to distrust time. To stay in sync with the world, I know, as do my siblings, that we keep our traps shut and never ask why. To subtract, at first glance, 15 minutes from the kitchen clock. It isn't the fault of the poor clock. There are many over the years. Mom sets the time fast, and Pop leaves it that way when he moves the hands forward in spring, back in fall. I know this only happens inside our home. The time on any clock that isn't ours can be taken at face value. Still, the tried and true workaround fixes things until out of the blue, 5 minutes gets added. What seems under control isn't. From then on, I must keep an even closer watch on time. 3, salvation. 1 minute sitting next to mom on the couch, on her lap, a yellow-bound first reader. She's much more alive than usual. What she's pointing out about the page must be why. The next, a switch flips in my brain. Black marks become letters, letters combine into words, words have meanings, meanings create different sets of rooms. In the space between those minutes, my life with her becomes bearable. Books will take me out of time for the time it takes to read them. Five, my bedroom clock. After leaving home, I copy on every clock of mine. Mom's 15 minutes fast. Then, when I start working at the phone company, that becomes 20. Then, when my marriage breaks up, 25. And finally, when the cats on the first floor become too many to take care of, half an hour. Doubts about the accuracy of the clocks and fear of forgetting what numbers to subtract become my constant companions. After John moves in, the clocks, one by one, get reset, except for the digital dual alarm on my side of the bed, which I change, but before the day is out, move forward again. Years pass before I let that last clock tell the right time at all times. Even longer before my heart follows suit. 6, on the dot at New Jersey Bell Telephone. 8 o'clock start means be on the floor at 0800 hours, not at 8:04. A record of any instance of tardiness will be kept in your personnel file. Your pay can be docked for tardiness of 0.1, i.e. 6 minutes, or more. A 15-minute break means leave the floor at 0900 hours, not 8:58, and return at 9:15, not 9:18, certainly not 9:20. 30 minutes for lunch at 16:30 hours means Lee's Tavern for quick burger and beer, then back running wires at 5. 6 minutes to run a new connect from line equipment in Union 4 to the 1920 cable, pair 164, a run of the block-long frame, means you take 6, not 5 or 7 minutes, and you better clean the old solder from the lugs and number check your work. Customer 5 codes have to be fixed within 1 hour, while 4 codes can take a day. During the first and last weeks of the month, the service order in-bin must be checked at 0700, 1300, 1600, and 1900 hours. 5 o'clock quit means leave the floor at 1700 hours, not at 4:55. Seven, atomic time. I want to show my new therapist what a good client I am. So after reading that early or late are signs of resistance, which in my eyes means bad, I arrive on the dot for every session. This isn't as easy as it sounds, because my watch, a gift from John, doesn't have minute lines, which leaves me uncertain, 2:28 or 2:29. I count on my cell phone because the phone company sets its network by NIST F1, a cesium atomic clock, which won't gain or lose a second in 100 million years. But after all the time spent on having perfect timing, such a letdown. No gold star, no hint I'm her favorite. In fact, now and then she runs a few minutes late. How dare she? She must know how bad that is, right? 9, 3:31 a.m. My mind flooded with unfinished work. The clunky word in a poem, the mountain of dirty laundry, the unreturned phone call to a dear friend, last month's invoice, an apology to John for the mistake I made that cost us the trick in bridge. The clock face tells me, go back to sleep. My mind stops me. I don't understand why until, at last crossing the edge of sleep, another voice spells it out. I must let go of time. Well, I haven't let go of time. So, because I can't. But what I have done is followed that thread and seen where it has taken me. So I'm currently working on a 5-book series that is all based on a trip to Ostia Antica, which is an extinct city on the outskirts of Rome. And time is all over these books. And so I'm going to read 2 poems from To See. So all of those poems from My Crooked House are all about personal time. And these new poems I expand to include this very long historical time. Number 9. Afternoon sun lets nothing hide. It shines on things as they are, as if time didn't exist around them, as if one moment were as good as the next. The past stands still beyond its reach. It cannot bring the dead back to life. It cannot undo what has been done or not done. How old looks up close. I didn't expect so much dust, so much not there-ness of years past. Little of the lives lived in this city lasts in its remains. Details, colors, and forms have returned to what they were before they were. Fragments of do not reveal the meaning of. The knowable has become quickly or slowly unknowable. Real importance reduced to words about importance. What has happened cannot predict what will. Nothing in this place not unaltered. Each layer built over past and under future. Shovels and screens can't excavate the heart. What's beneath will not be forced to show. This is not the world we walked in our expectations. Absence grows here. This is all there is. What I want to see is gone. What I want to see refuses to take no for an answer, refuses every emptiness. Even so, what I want doesn't matter. 11. Aeneas lands at the mouth of the Tiber. Settlement becomes colony. Jupiter, Juno, Minerva. The river changes its course. You keep Rome fed, all grain comes through you. Invaders take over, leave. Pirates sack, leave. Saracens, emperors, popes. Cartwheels carve ruts into basalt blocks. Salts rise from the ground, dissolve cement. Fortunes made and lost, loved ones found and lost. Medea, Ovid's only play, disappears without a trace, but his poems are handed down in many tongues. Layers of dirt turn into layers of time. St. Augustine writes that his mother and he panted with the mouth of our heart. Buildings fall and no one picks them up. The book once loved no longer opened. The streets fill with rubble. Tomorrow will not be like today. Order slips into order of a different kind. Marble gravestones, inscriptions intact, reused as drainage lids. Absence takes over from presence. Ionaria, described as a frivolous girl in graffiti, withers to a name derived from first month of the Roman calendar. The river dries up, the empire falls. The Cardo becomes overgrown. Intrusive roots crack tufa blocks. Growth turns into decay, turns into growth, back and forth blurs into a single line until decay wins out. No one remembers what sacrifice to make to the gods to change unfavorable winds. No one's left to sweep the sand. The upper floor of the insula becomes the ground. You stick to time-honored ways, but have a mind of your own. The imprint of roads that existed before the Roman grid becomes hard to find. Animals burrow, birds nest. The connection between carved symbols, branch, stick, and bracelet, no longer clear. Hands and minds never stop trying to keep things from going away. Tourists pick up loose tesserae as souvenirs. You're seen from a window. Myths replace history. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. That was beautiful. I'm battling currently with my network connection. So if you see me going in and out, I'm on here on my cell phone. So I'm still here with you all, even if you can't see me. Thank you so much, Teresa. Let's move on to Cindy Veach. Hello, Cindy.
Hey, Dimitri. Hi, everybody, and thank you for having me again. This is such a pleasure. As Dimitri mentioned, I'm going to read from my most recent book, Her Kind, which is themed around the Salem witch trials, divorce, and contemporary politics. So as Teresa talked about themes, each of my books has tended to have certain themes and that don't necessarily run from one book to the other, with the exception of feminism, which you will find in all my books. So just a little background on this book. In 2016, after living in the Salem area for over 20 years, I stumbled on the Salem witch trials when I was just cutting through a side street. And up to that point, I had sort of succumbed to the witch kitsch narrative of modern day Salem. But for some reason on that day, I was changed and realized these were innocent human beings who were murdered. And I decided to write a poem for each of the 20 victims. While I was writing those victim poems, I was also making the difficult decision to end a long marriage. And as the person who filed for divorce, I felt judged. And as I empowered myself to do what I needed to do, I felt a kinship with the victims of the witch trials, who often were persecuted for living outside of the Puritan norms of the time. All of this coincided with Donald Trump being elected, and he was like a poison to me. His narcissism, misogyny, gaslighting, and references to the witch hunts and the witch trials in order to paint himself as a victim. So this was all triggering for me, and he found his way into the book. But at the same time, I wanted to push back at the patriarchy and to celebrate women as witches and reclaim the word witch and hold women up who were conjuring their own magic. So I'm going to read a few poems from each one of those themes, and the first will be the Salem witch trial theme. Many of the poems in the book are specific formal poems, so I'll just mention that if the poem I'm reading is a formal poem. This is called a pantoum. It's a poem of 4-line stanzas where various lines repeat. Reasons you might have been accused of being witch in 1692. You are a woman. You are middle-aged. You have an extra nipple, mole, freckle, or basically any other mark on your body. You stumble over your words. You have an extra nipple, mole, freckle. When asked to say a prayer, you stumble over the words. You are married but don't have children. When asked to say a prayer, you are the envy of other people. You are married but don't have enough children. You associate with someone suspected of witchcraft. You are the envy of other people. You are perceived as bitchy. You associate with someone suspected of witchcraft. Your milk spoiled. You are perceived as bitchy. You are of low status. Your milk spoiled. Or anything vaguely negative happened to or around you. You are of low status. You have any mark on your body. Your milk spoiled. You are a woman. You are middle-aged. There are 13 victim poems in the book for each of the female victims. So I'm going to read a couple of those. Elizabeth Howe was one of the victims. Her husband was blind, and she had to take over running the farm, which was something that women were not supposed to be doing during that time. Elizabeth Howe of Sorrows, hanged July 19, 1692. I had to be my husband's eyes, the light that could not reach them, leading him about by the hand, tilling the land my father gave me, running the household, and for this they would not let me come into the church of Ipswich. And for this they said I bewitched horses, cows, sows, and was the cause of sorrows that killed the Pearlies' little Hannah. No, never in all my life. I saw I had to be the husband, eyes, mouth, muscle, and took the lead and hanged for it. Rebecca Nurse of the Accused, hanged July 19, 1692. At first, the jury returned not guilty, to which the judge said, retire and consider the not. After all, she had not answered the questions she had not heard. Guilty of being hard of hearing, maybe mouthing what? Guilty of having a temper, arguing with neighbors. Guilty too of piety, 39 attesting to her deep devotion. Still, the afflicted swore it was her apparition that did the pinchings and prickings of their flesh. And in court, when she raised her arms, the afflicted raised their arms. And when she inclined her head, the afflicted inclined their heads. And then this last one, I'll read about the witch trials. It's sort of a nod to the modern day Salem. It's sort of the witch kitsch atmosphere. And this poem is a sonnet. It's 14 lines with the end rhyme scheme. The Witch Dungeon Museum. Here you will find the truth has morphed into yet another tourist trap. A tour through a low-budget movie set where uncouth locals reenact the trials before a jury of poor, unblinking, aging mannequins. Downstairs in the basement dungeon, you're in for more sad shenanigans. Sagging dummies being flogged and bent in two, while the witch, just convicted upstairs on cue, shrills and jumps out, boo. Total veracity is guaranteed. All signage bears a quintessential witch silhouette, a deja vu of Halloween candy wrappers. Please, dear tourist, keep in mind, there were never any witches here. Now I'm going to read two poems from the divorce theme. And the first one actually opens the book. It's titled I Witch, and it's sort of a crossover between the two themes of divorce and the witch trials. So what if I woke up changed? It's not like I'm a wild hog or some evil thing, not a real hog that follows you home, jumps into the window, a monkey with cock's feet with claws. Don't believe what my accuser says, or believe it. The fact is, my divorce attorney's building sits on the site of the prison where they kept the accused in chains in 1692. I came there with a silk scarf worn loosely at the neck, borders looped with colored thread. He came with daisies, dark chocolate, and proclaimed, my wife came towards me and found fault with me. Downstairs in the dungeon, they chained us to the walls to keep our spirits from escaping in the likeness of a bird. That poem was an American sonnet, so it's just 14 lines. This one is not a formal poem, but it does have a lot of rhyme in it, and you will hear it as I read it. I filed for divorce and sundry other acts of witchcraft. Therefore, I am the earthquake and its tectonic plate, a rock chucked into a languid lake. I am the headache that keeps you awake, an unexpected snake at the end of the rake, a rock tossed into a placid lake. I am the shake that rattles the gate and the faux pas that deflates the cake, a rock dropped into a flat lake. I am a plague outbreak, the thirst you can't slake, a rock flung into a tranquil lake and the rip in something opaque. I am the damn stake in the landscape, the fire break that forsakes, a rock cast into a still lake, the mean old drake, the keepsake that's fake, a rock hurled into a serene lake, the cause of your toothache in the failed windbreak, every mistake, a rock pitched into a quiet lake. I am the one to hate, no one's namesake, the earthquake, and its tectonic plate. So now I will read 3 poems that carry that political theme that I mentioned, and some of them in particular, some of the victim poems, they're titled with a title that reflects either a headline from that time or something that Trump may have said. Trump has called the investigation a witch hunt 84 times. Martha Carrier, hanged August 19, 1692. This is another sonnet. They said she brought smallpox to Andover. They said she killed her father and brother, making her a queen in hell, aka landowner. Neighbors testified it was none other than Goody Carrier who haunted them at night. They said she bit Sue Sheldon, threatening to cut her throat because she wanted her to sign the book. She stuck a pin in dumb Ann Putnam, killed Samuel Preston's cow for being very lusty, and there was that devil man whispering in her ear. Somehow she caused the death of Alan Toothaker's cat. For these complaints, though each one was a lie, she was condemned by the grace of God to die. And then this is a little more contemporary. Another sonnet. Woman climbs Statue of Liberty in protest. Teresa Patricia Akumu guilty of trespassing, 2018. She said, I climbed to protest our nation's zero tolerance immigration policy. She said, I climbed to abolish ICE. They said trespasser. They said disorderly conduct. When she sat on the skirts of Lady Liberty, we watched them climb after her. They said, get down. Our hero said, I'm not discouraged. She made her bed, and we watched and cheered and put a curse on those who wanted to arrest her for protesting, putting children into cages. Oh yes, we witches watched her carry our truth up and over that ledge like a beautiful soothsayer, strong and live. Goodbye, Dark Ages. We climb with her. We climb with her. And then this last one from the book I'll read is, it's a triolé, which is a short 8-line poem where there's only 3 lines that don't repeat. And this is a poem that's composed entirely of tweets related to a Taylor Swift performance. Taylor Swift makes Forbes' most powerful woman list. A whole witch ritual. I love you, Taylor A. Swift. Shake off the haters. Here's to savvy, broomsticks, red lipstick. She's giving me major Scarlet Witch vibes, and I am here for it. A whole witch ritual. I love you, Taylor A. Swift. I wanted to hug her when she started pointing to herself, raised a fist. They're burning all the witches, even if you aren't one. Here's to witch grit, a whole witch ritual. I love you, Taylor A. Swift. Shake off the haters. Here's to savvy, broomsticks, red lipstick. Then I could just read one quick one from a new manuscript, and unlike my others, it's a little bit of a departure because it's not based on sort of local history, but it is feminist. It explores female tropes, and it delves into various losses that the speaker sort of traces back their origins to monsters such as shame and grief, asexuality, the other mother, that have been created by society, sort of the delta between what society thinks a woman or mother or daughter should be and what she is. And that creates these sort of monsters that we live with. So I'll just read one. A partial catalog of my monsters, beginning with Journey to the Center of the Earth. One of my monsters is the flesh-eating Dimetron. One is a giant chameleon with a 20-foot tongue. One takes the shape of a man with a dirk in my girlhood bedroom. One is the devil Dementia, who took his prehensile tentacle, pried the latch, and emptied my mother. One of my monsters is the good girl. She's huge like a dirigible, huge like a jolly green giant. She can't pick up a pin, can't make a move without wrecking her house. One is the other mother. She slapped her child for biting the baby she bled out to birth. Thus the monster called shame. is the crone who begat the bone vampire, who feasts on spine, hip, femoral neck. One is forgetting, the other remembering. She was a girl, waving to her father, leaving on a trip, his promise to bring her back little hotel soaps. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cindy. And thank you, Teresa. So now I think is a good time to start our conversation session where the students of Caldwell will have their voice. They've been coming up with some questions, and I am seeing some things in the chat already. And this one's from Megan A. I find it interesting how you wrote about the Salem witch trials twice from your chapbook and her. Was there any reason behind it, or is it just a significant topic for you?
That's a great question. Well, that's how the book started, actually, was this inspiration to write a poem for each of the 20 victims. And so I did that, and then I started the book, and in the book became so feminist that I'm like, I can't put the guys in the book. It doesn't make sense. But I also wanted to honor the 20 victims because it was really important to me that that be in print, that be out there. So that's why I did the chapbook, because that meant I kept them all together and honored my vision and how I wanted to pay tribute to them.
I have a quick question.
Go for it, Sarah.
So I know that you have already mentioned like how you felt about the Salem witch trials and like you, but like more specifically, like why did the Salem witch trials like resonate with your experience like more than any other like historical being treated unfairly, like anything during like the 1800s or rather like stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, another great question. I guess, you know, as a writer, it was like an epiphany for me, is the only way I can explain it. You know, it's one of those things that I lived there for almost 30 years in the Salem area. I knew that history. I knew what Salem was about, and yet, I don't know, the right time, the right place, somehow it just affected me in a way that I could not turn away from. And so I can't really explain it other than a moment of epiphany. And I know there's many other things in history and certainly in current times that are equally as horrid. I mean, the Vietnam War was very upsetting to me. I grew up during that time and affected me greatly, but it's something I haven't really been able to write about.
Thank you. And also build on that question, area to do like any.
Hello, Sarah, are you still with us?
Sarah, you might want to type your question into the chat. I think you're kind of breaking up a little bit here. Can you hear me?
Okay, she muted. She might be typing. Okay, cool.
Oh, okay.
All right, so Sarah's getting her questions. You got questions, you can send your comment, or you can come on as well. And finally, you come in and then that, Sarah.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Cindy, for reading your work. It was wonderful. I had a wonderful experience reading it. And I did have a question about kind of the themes and how you implement spiritual elements into your poetry. So as I was reading, I couldn't help but notice that you discuss both supernatural themes with witchcraft, but also religious themes, like as you did in You've Got to Deny, and Push Back on These Women and Rose of Jericho. So my question really is, how far does your experience with both realms of spirituality reach, if it does at all?
Can you repeat that last part again? Sorry.
Sure. So my question is, how far does your experience with both realms of spirituality reach, if it does at all? If you have any kind of, I guess, experience with either one.
Well, I mean, I was raised Catholic. That was my upbringing, mostly Catholic school, which, you know, I'm not a practicing Catholic any longer. But I have that background. You know, I felt it was important in the book. You know, there are poems like where I do bring in the idea of the spirit and it, like Rose of Jericho, basically admitting, I don't believe, but yet I'm bringing this dried Rose of Jericho out and letting it come to life as a way of a sort of rebirth. And there were, the whole Salem witch trials, the Puritan faith. Many of the victims were ostracized because they lived outside that faith, for even just for wearing some kind of flamboyant scarf or dressing differently. So that needed to be a part of the book, that sense of religion deciding someone's fate in the way that it did in that era.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. So while we're still waiting for Sarah to come in, someone else can come in with a question if they like. All right, I'm going to actually jump in with a question. Teresa, I've sat with your book for quite some time since I've been able to experience this book in several different iterations throughout my years here at CavanKerry. But I never asked you what was the premise or the precipice of you going through these therapy sessions and then turning all these experiences into a book that then became a collection, or into a bunch of poems that became a collection. I'm interested, what came first? Did some of those sessions in therapy come first, or were you already writing about some of those? And it was kind of like on your subconscious, and then when you went to therapy, it kind of manifested into a string or a narrative you were able to follow.
Complicated question. I think it is which came first, the chicken or the egg, as far as which came first. Was I thinking about this? To go back to my point about threads through one's work, time, my own memories, social memories, cultural memories are very, very present in my work. And excavation is very present in my work. The newer work has a lot to do with, archaeology. And I think poetry has a lot to do with archaeology. The sense of going deeper and deeper and deeper. And for me, there's a very, very strong connection between that and therapy and, so life, therapy, and archaeology, time and memory run through all of them. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, definitely. It sure does. Thanks. And Marianne Miller just said that Carolina, please be sure to ask Teresa Carson your good question, which I just put Carolina on the spot. I'm sorry, but we do have Sarah back, so Carolina does get a second to collect herself. Hey Sarah, thank you for joining us again. It looks like you found a good spot.
Yeah, sorry, I had to fix my connection. But my question was basically, I know you said that you lived in that area like your whole life, but like, did you have to do like any like additional research, like the specific people like that you mentioned? Like, did that take more research, and did you kind of just do that for like the book, or did you just kind of do it like also for your own learning?
For both, for me and for the book. And yes, a great deal of research was involved. So when I decided to write a poem about each of the victims, I needed to read about them. And there's a wonderful site at the University of Virginia. It's the Salem Trials transcription project. It's all open, it's public. Anyone can go there. All the court records have been transcribed and digitized. So you can read their actual words, all the depositions, the testimony. So I spent a lot of time reading about each of the individual victims, and it could take a long time, weeks sometimes, for me to find that thread of what I could respond to, what I could write about that person. And then I read several books about the witch trials. So it was good for me and good for the book. I learned a lot.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. Yeah, just to come in with that idea too, with both Cindy and Teresa, I do love this idea of needing to research or do that archaeological dig back into memories and such. And there's a type of poetry called docupoetics, where you're looking through documents and you're looking through memory to put things together. And the poet laureate of Houston, Lupe Met, has also created this term called anthropoetics, which is kind of like the baby or what's the conceptualized idea of docupoetics, where people actually spend time in those places that they're researching. And Cindy, it seemed like you were also doing that, you know, living in contemporary Salem, but then also digging back and doing that research as well, doing a bit of the anthropological work, as Teresa is suggesting. So that's great. Yeah, no worries, Sarah, for the audio. Emanuele looks like, wait, so I can ask out loud, but I had another question for Cindy. Cool, thank you, Emanuele. How do you decide to implement elements of modern life into poems that mainly discuss the past?
Yes, good question. Not a good. You guys are amazing. They're all great questions. Well, you know, I see a lot of the past and the present, and that is what really drove me to bring those threads into Her Kind, because what I saw happening in history, I see happening today. Injustice, people being accused of things who are innocent, and we're living outside of, I mean, look what's happening now with so many things, trans, abortion. I mean, it's you know, they say history repeats itself. And so it's very important to me to not just talk about the past.
Yeah, for sure.
I have another question. I'm sorry, my audio keeps messing up. Like I keep like not being able to hear anything. One of my last questions was for you, Cindy, was also the fact that I know that like you talked about how it went through like your phases, like with like how you felt with divorce. So I was also wondering if you have anything of like, you know, how there's like 5 stages of like, I think they call like 5 stages of denial or something like that. So did you have like any of those like subtle hints in any of the poems, like some of the five stages of grief? There it is. Is it like some of it like has to do with like towards the end? I kind of felt like there was some acceptance and like from verses like in the beginning.
Yes. You've done a close reading, because when you get to the end of the book, in fact, it ends with that poem, I Hecate, which is basically celebrating being able to, you know, make a change, even though it took 3 heads, right? That's how the poem talks about Hecate. But yeah, I mean, it's still a work in progress dealing with divorce after 30 years of marriage. So it's all very complicated, but part of what I mentioned, what I wanted to do in the book was to also celebrate women, you know, celebrate their magic, making their own magic and reinventing themselves. So I wanted the book to move in that direction at the end.
Okay, thank you. Because that's what I kind of thought with the last poem. I felt like there was a lot of acceptance. There's like even verses like the first poem, it kind of seemed like it's not like acceptance, but like even during the middle, like it seems like some of it was just like, why am I like being singled out for like little stuff like this kind of feeling?
Yeah, you got it.
All right, thank you so much. Other questions? All right, cool. Carolina, what did it feel like to begin to get help and begin therapy for the mental health problems you were perhaps experiencing?
Well, I mean, I love therapy. So let me start with that. It's difficult. It's a difficult process. And, you know, my past was very complicated. And so it was also a complicated process. But I think harder was writing about it and being honest about it. You know, the difficulties plus the you know, it again, it forces you to excavate yourself in many ways that are not always pleasant. And, you know, poetry is not always pleasant, and the creative process is not always pleasant. So I think that, and you know, it's all, again, I see it all as part of just my life. I am not of the opinion, there are many writers who I've met or who have written about that, you know, they think they don't want to mess with their unconscious. And I am not of that school. I am of the school that the more you get to know your unconscious, the better a writer you can become, the better a creator you can become, the better a person you can become.
Yes, I actually had a question for you as well when it came to mental health. I was wondering, I didn't have your book I didn't have your book, so I'm not really sure like of any of the poems inside of it. But while you were reading it, some of the questions that like I gathered were, well, I know you talked about like mental health, or like any of it like triggering for you to like for your own mental health, like when you were writing these poems, and any of it like trigger stuff within you again.
I wouldn't say trigger, but you have to, you know, when you're writing, you know, maybe Cindy can also speak to this, you know, considering the, you know, the work she's doing, you have to relive it somehow. So it may not be triggering, but in order to really get, again, you know, to the bottom of it, you have to go into it, which, you know, you really have to jump into the deep waters of it. So but it's more controlled. You know, it's different when you're going through something and you're, you know, you're having mental health issues, and it's quite another thing when you are further along and you can, you know, I couldn't write about it back then, but once you get further along and you can kind of contain how you jump into it, I think is the difference. And so it's not really triggering, but it definitely, you know, caused me to relive many of the things.
Okay, thank you. That was basically what I was trying to get at. I just couldn't figure
Yeah.
out another word other than triggering.
Yeah. It's a good question. And I'm sure Cindy, you know, you with the divorce and everything, I mean, there is a way you have to go into what you're, you know, places you don't necessarily want to go into, right?
Yeah. And for me, like it was like 2 years into the separation, because it was a long separation, like 4 years before we actually, you know, divorced.
Yeah.
So it was a couple years into it before I started writing about it. So again, it's like you sort of, and I did see a therapist during that whole period. You know, you kind of have to, like you said, Teresa, contain it. You have to get it sort of contained before you can truly write about it. So, you know, doing the witch trial poems was kind of good because it was almost like a distraction from
True.
I was going through. And also one of the reasons I choose formal forms a lot of times, because sometimes when you put those kind of poems into a form, it's a little bit easier to manage.
Yeah, I do that also. I think the form, you know, the form again kind of acts as a container.
Yeah.
So it doesn't get to go all over the place. It's
right.
Like, I can contain this a little bit.
Yeah.
It also gives you a different sense of direction, right? I think, especially with writing form poems, you're concentrating on the form, and then you're building the content around the form.
Right.
So I think I sometimes see that form as a good way to get to tougher subjects when we're trying to write, maybe more vulnerable subjects, because it's kind of a subconscious misdirect for ourselves. It's kind of like a hack through it.
Yeah. And often it leads you somewhere you wouldn't have gone necessarily, you know, because
Right.
you're trying to fit it into a certain, you know, formula. And so it's a stretch.
Right.
Yeah.
I have 14 lines. I don't have 3 pages. I have 14 lines.
Yeah.
And I love the word distraction, right? Because it's a little bit of a distraction from the main thing that's going on.
Yeah. Kind of a game. Like,
I'm doing this poem a day for April, National Poetry Month, and it's on form. It's like this calendar someone put together, and every day is a different form. And it's been rough. It's been really rough. Yeah, it's good, but yeah, it's rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, form poems take a while to get right. I mean, unless sometimes you strike gold and it just comes out the way it is the first time. It might be the muses, or maybe Cindy has some extra magic, or something helps us out. You know what? Speaking of hacks, and speaking of knowing things a bit in hindsight, because it takes some time to write through some certain things. Let's think about hindsight. What do you know now as the author today that you wanted to know as the author when you first started writing? If you were able to tell that author of yourself that was only writing for a year or two at the time, after spending so much time with your work, what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, because I've been at it for a long time, and I took a lot of time off when I had kids and a corporate job and stuff. I would say persistence. It's a craft. I mean, it's a, yes, there's inspiration, but there's a lot of craft to it, and there's a lot of just stick to it. Keep going, persist, because there's a lot of rejection involved in writing, and you know, it takes time to grow as a writer. I'm still learning. I'm still growing.
Yeah.
Don't give up. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think persistence is a good one. I'd also say, like, you know, that the more you do it, the more you understand that you don't understand the process.
Yes.
And however you can create containers, you cannot control the process, and that actually becomes less frightening. It's I say that, but there are times I'm absolutely terrified. But it becomes a little less frightening. And the other thing that I'd have to say goes back to the question about what was it about the witch trials that, you know, Cindy was, you know, attracted to. The other thing is to pay attention to what catches your eye, and I mean your metaphorical eye also, because what Cindy is attracted to is not what I'm attracted to, but only you can start to, again, to kind of get to see what are the threads that I'm interested in. You know, what gets me excited about sitting down to work, and that the sooner you start paying attention to that, it took me a long time to pay attention to that, the sooner you, again, can really expand your work.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for those golden nuggets of advice, ladies. And with a couple of minutes left, I think this might be a good spot to end it, unless I'll wait the last second to see if anyone has an itching question they want to jump in with before they have to run off to class. I'll start the clock for 10 seconds now. Should have the Jeopardy music.
Dun, dun, dun.
Okay. All right. With that being said, Caldwell University, thank you so much for having us. Professor Miller, thank you so much for having us. And Cindy and Teresa, as always, you all do such a wonderful, wonderful job reading and then answering my questions, sometimes tough and obscure questions. So I do appreciate that. Yeah, and please enjoy the rest of your morning out on the West Coast, and everyone else enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I'm so glad that you had a good time, and thank you for staying with us.
Thank you all. It was
Right.
wonderful.
Yes. Thank you all.
Nice
Great
meeting you guys.
Wonderful questions, and great to hear your work, Teresa.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks,
Cindy, thank you.
Mary
And
Ann.
Dimitri.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank
All
you
right.
for the questions. All the students are saying goodbye over here, and thank you. So,
Yeah.
if we come up with any more, I'll feel free to email you. Is that all right? And
Yeah.
Most definitely.
okay,
Yeah.
Totally fine. Yep.
all right. Thank you so much. All right,
Mary
have a
Ann.
good rest of your day. Thank you, Dimitri.
Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.